Well, if you're outraged by the evidence coming out that the IRS was being used as an ideological enforcer by partisans within the government, you may be even more outraged to discover that some of those responsible were actually paid bonuses for their work with your tax dollars. Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. What a week. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with the Mike Ozanian, Morgan Brennan, Rick Ungar, and Sabrina Schaeffer. Now, Rick, this is usually Steve Forbes' job to start on this subject, but do you believe that these individuals who have screwed up so immeasurably deserve bonuses?
I feel this great need to start talking about the flat tax. All
right, let's stay on subject.
I will resist it. Listen, believe it or not, I actually think that this whole bonus idea is a very bad idea, particularly as it's applied to the IRS. Look, you remember when we had a situation with private health insurance companies when they were bonusing their adjusters. They were paying them to deny claims, so obviously they were motivated to turn people down who had a right to get it. I have a very similar problem with IRS agents being paid to collect more money. But I'll tell you the great surprise that I came across.
Or to screw up, as they did in this case.
But I'll tell you the great shock. Do you know who favors bonusing federal government employees?
Who?
I was stunned. The Heritage Foundation, of all places. I want to quickly read you a quote. It won't take long.
Well, you're an agent of the Heritage Foundation. I know that. I suspected that for a while.
I'm accused of many
things.
If you read
a quote, do it very quickly.
Very quickly from James Shirk, senior economist. There is a very good reason to have bonuses. We should shift the distribution of pay less towards base pay to bonuses. Mistake.
Yeah. All right. Mike Ozanian, the fact is that Lois Lerner, she's the woman who is in charge of tax exemption at the IRS. She got a $42,000 bonus, or several bonuses adding up to over $40,000. Last week, she gave a bunch of information out that just wasn't true. Her predecessor, by the way, Sarah Hall Ingram, got $100,000 in bonuses over 3 or 4 years. All told, $92 million in bonuses went out to IRS officials. Isn't that wrong?
David, you're trying to get us all audited, I think, on this show today.
It's too late. They've already got your number.
Clearly, that's
They've
wrong.
got your number and mine.
But I would agree with the Heritage Foundation. I think, in general, government employee pay proportionally should shift more towards bonuses with strict performance metrics. In a situation like that, you'd encourage government employees to perform better. But as far as the IRS, no, obviously in this case, they don't deserve bonuses.
But Sabrina, I'm looking around for any kind of metrics in which somebody behaved well, and I don't see it.
That's exactly my thought. This is not, we're not in a market here, right? There's no competitor for those in government. So what are they being judged on? Are they being judged on the number of conservative groups that they muzzle? I mean, this seems to have some serious conflicts of interest. I like the idea of making government employees actually less effective, I think. I don't want to do anything that would encourage them to be more active, and I don't understand how we're even basing something like $92 million worth of bonuses. This seems very concerning to me.
And you know, Morgan, it's not only the cash in bonuses, it's also getting bumped up and getting recognized. They even give awards to some of the people involved with this. Sarah Hall Graham, by the way, guess what she's doing now? And they're going to talk about this in the next half hour. She is now managing the IRS role in Obamacare. So people are actually, and she was the one under whose tutorship all this stuff began.
Okay, well, you know what? I think we're mixing this up. There's a few bad eggs that got bonuses. I don't think everybody should have their bonuses axed altogether. The truth of the matter is the OMB is already putting clamps down, and sequestration has a big part to play in this on the bonuses that go out to people in the government. There's also legislation there to cap some of these bonuses. So I think what we're talking about is maybe perhaps slightly dated here. And that being said, I also think that you need to have bonuses, which in many cases in the government are tied to performance already. I do think you need to have those to be competitive with the private sector.
But Rick, you look at the people who got bonuses. First of all of the major players who have been involved in bad business, whether it was ideological, mismanagement, whatever it is finally discovered to be, they all got bonuses. It was just sort of a matter of course here.
Well, I do have to say, in the case of Miss Lerner, I do hope she saved her bonus money, because I have a funny feeling she may be out of work in the next few weeks.
Or Sarah Hall Graham.
Probably went to taxes.
So, and I also have to note that it's truly an extraordinary week, because Sabrina and I agreed, if I'm not mistaken, which I don't think has ever happened. Look, all the way around.
Do you know what I think is a
bonusing in the federal government just doesn't make sense. Pay these people well, expect them to do a good job. If they do a bad job, get rid of them. but bonuses don't fit.
But Sabrina, what bothers me about this whole thing is that everything seemed to be a matter of course. I mean, this is just the way they did business. And of course, the president bumped up Sarah Hall Graham, appointing her to be in charge of the Obamacare IRS role. This is such a dangerous moment in our history because the social contract between the people who pay taxes and the government, in my eyes, has been broken by this scandal. Is the president capable of fixing it after he promoted and gave bonuses to these people?
He didn't promote.
Well, I think that that's the issue here is that we're having a serious trust issue, and the president has been trying to distance himself and sort of act as, because this didn't happen within the walls of the White House, somehow he is immune from any kind of blame here. But the reality is he sets the tone for the whole administration, and this massive, big government, a massive regulatory state is his responsibility. And so I think he has a lot of sort of healing to do with the American people and saying, you know what, I'm not going to give bonuses to these people. I'm going to find out who's behind this, because I don't think some bureaucrat in Cincinnati woke up one day and said, hey, guess what, I'm going to start going after some of these Tea Party groups. Clearly,
that's an interesting point. And actually, Stephen Miller, who was under the grill on Friday about all this, spoke to this point. I believe we have a soundbite from that where he talked about whether there was whether this was just mismanagement or whether it was partisanship. Let's play the sound.
I do not believe that partisanship motivated the people who engaged in the practices described in the Treasury Inspector General's report.
Now, Mike Ozanian, this to me is the definition of partisanship. The United States is on track to take over OPEC as the major worldwide provider of new oil supplies. Now, this on the heels of new reports showing the areas across the Dakotas and Montana actually have twice the oil and gas reserves that we had previously thought. Well, now the administration is easing up on some restrictions on fracking to produce more oil and natural gas. But Sabrina, you say this is nowhere near enough, that we have to go all in. Explain.
I think we have to let industry go all in. I think the mistake is to allow government to get involved in this. We need to have government get out of the way, stop picking winners and losers, and allow industry to make the best decisions about where their research and technology and development goes. I think that's the surest path to energy efficiency, to lower prices, to a sound economy, and to a better environment.
And, Rick, you can have national goals without having government-direct involvement. I mean, we remember JFK saying, I'm going to put a man on the moon in 10 years. He did it. We did it. The United States did. It was a great victory. Government was very much, almost entirely involved in that. But this would be a private sector national goal. What's wrong with that?
Actually, I have no objection to taking advantage of an opportunity that appears to be coming around. If we can become the world force, that's a wonderful thing. Where I get a little bit nervous about the all-in connotation is this. There are downsides to this kind of energy. I recognize the upsides. It will produce jobs. It will benefit our lives in a lot of ways.
Enormous.
But let's not lose sight of the long term. Where this country always gets in trouble is when we do things solely for short-term objectives. Here's what I propose, a grand bargain. Let's make it easier for the development of these oil shales. I'm all for it. But in return, let's ask the energy producers to get more involved in developing the better sources of energy for the future.
You know, Rick, I just realized what you reminded me. Monty Hall, let's make a deal, right? That's what it is. I knew there was somebody out there. All right, Mike, let me just emphasize how important this report is. The International Energy Agency came out with this report, and here's what they said. You can't overemphasize this enough. The supply shock, and this I'm reading from their report, created by a surge in North American oil production will be as transformative to the market over the next 5 years as was the rise of Chinese demand over the last 15 years. We have the potential of overtaking OPEC. Well, that's a great goal.
I agree with Sabrina, which basically what she was saying is let's get the government out of the way and let's unleash the private sector. I don't like the idea of collectivism with some sort of goal of overtaking OPEC as an objective. However, what if oil goes back to $17 a barrel like it was in the 1990s? Just unleash the private sector, David. They'll do a far better job than the government will. We've seen these past few years all these lousy investments in tech, Solyndra, the president standing there saying, this is the wave of the future. Then a year later, the company's in bankruptcy. No, get the government out.
But Morgan, I do like focusing on OPEC, and I'll tell you why. For so long, since the 1970s, for my entire life, we have been at the beck and call of what OPEC does. It would be so nice to just put them as a minor inconvenience rather than a major inconvenience in our lives.
Yeah, I think it's a gutsy goal. I'm actually all for this as well. And I think the numbers support me here. I think Mike hit the nail on the head when he said unleash the private sector. If you look at 2006 through 2011, we're talking about recession years, right? When you look at that, traditional energy expanded 60%, created 500,000 jobs. If government just got out of the way and actually put a vote of confidence behind traditional energy, I think you'd see those numbers go crazy. I think this is the wave of the future, and higher median salaries.
Rick, this is your gal Morgan talk. So often you've said she's the smartest one in a group. She's disagreeing with you.
I don't disagree that she's the smartest in the group, clearly. But let's get a little bit more specific about what this means, getting the government out of the way. If you're saying remove all regulations on how oil is produced, that's silly.
I don't think anybody's saying.
we need to get
Wait. Let's
hold on. No. Let's let Morgan explain. What do you mean by that, Morgan?
What I mean by that is every time President Obama gets up and talks about the big, bad, evil oil companies and how we have to cut their tax subsidies, etc., I think that pushes back against the private company.
Okay.
Just saying that takes
Rick,
away that
can you go that far?
I can't.
We're trying to sell you now, Rick.
But
you're trying to sell us. We're trying to sell you.
Let me bring one. I see where you're going, but let me add one more thing to it, which is you can't totally get government out of the mix because you have this federal land involved that people want to drill. Again, I'm going to take you to that grand bargain. You want to get government out like Morgan's talking about? Okay. You want to open up more federal land? Okay. Oil companies do something about producing good
But Sabrina,
energy.
the fact, hold on, Sabrina, I got to bring a fact in here, which is that most of the significant oil and gas discoveries taking place right now are not on federal lands, they're on state or private lands. And that is why, I'm sorry to let the facts come into an argument here, but that's why the federal government is holding up this progress through the EPA. If they just got the EPA out of the way for a lot of the nonsense regulations they're doing, we really could beat OPEC.
And through the rhetoric. I mean, let's get rid of some of the politicization and the alarmism around so many of these different methods. I mean, let's look at fracking for a second, which is what we're talking about. There's been so much alarmism around this, and we're talking about injecting water and a chemical. Sometimes these chemicals are entirely food-based, right? We saw the governor of California drink it, yet the alarmism and the hysteria over using, this methodology that's been developing over decades is really holding things back. We don't want the American people to think that the groundwater is going to be contaminated by something that has absolutely no proof of happening.
By the way,
because of this, and that's coming from
cool or not cool. Abercrombie Fitch CEO Mike Jeffrey says he regrets if a comment he made back in 2006 offended anybody. But he's not really apologizing for it either. Problem is that comment has since gone viral again, and now so are the protests. What did he say? Here it is. In quotes, in every school there are the cool kids and the popular kids, and then there are the not so cool kids. Candidly, we go after the cool kids. A lot of people don't belong in our clothes, and they can't belong, end quote. Well, the retailer lacks extra large and double extra large sizes, but Sabrina has no problem with this. Explain your flip side, Sabrina.
Well, look, this is classic mean girl behavior, right? But I think everybody's assuming that this is a bad thing. I don't think so. I think that everyone actually wants to be part of that cool club. They want exclusivity, right? They want to be part of the small group, excuse me. So I think that this will actually boost sales for Abercrombie among those cool kids.
All right. Morgan, what do you think? Will this exclusivity be good for the company or not?
No, I think not only do I think this is a bad marketing maneuver, particularly going forward, but I think the company's biting off its nose to spite its face here. I think this is a bad business maneuver. And I'll tell you why. Because one of the largest untapped and underserved growing markets in terms of retail is plus-size females. And we're seeing their competitors, Lucky Brands, H&M, even the Kardashians, even the most exclusive of the exclusive, Dolce & Gabbana and Chanel, have all been running out larger sizes to accommodate plus-size females. And I think they need to get on board and take a look at this.
But, Mike, there are some successful companies that base their success on exclusivity. Look at Tiffany & Company, by the way. Not everybody can afford Tiffany, and they're doing pretty well.
Or Armani, David. Hey, look, the stock is up since the CEO has made these comments more than the market and more than the industry.
Interesting.
So there's something to be said for that.
All right. What do you think, Rick?
I think that what's not cool is Mr. Jeffries. Look, my daughter is in great shape, very attractive, fits the MO of the customer for Abercrombie. She was so insulted by these comments. Why? Because the ethos of his customer today is very different than the old days. They don't think it's cool to pick on people who are larger size. That's not how we decide what's cool.
Sabrina, what do you think of that?
Yeah. I think that that's a fair point, but let's remember this is a company that is always pushing the boundaries with their clothing, with what they say. I think everyone remembers their catalogs, which are sort of borderline pornographic. They released those thongs for tweeners. It was totally inappropriate and not very
They're
classy.
always edgy. There's no question.
There's always edgy, and they're looking for that little edge all the time to keep them up in sales.